So this event, these wildfires and these burning down of major areas of Los Angeles, it encapsulates so much of what Mars retrograde and debilitated in Cancer is all about. So how could a county that is so aware of a problem fail so miserably when the exact scenario was predicted? So when this Mars transit comes along, just within a week of it happening, it essentially blew the situation up in their face. And just like how we saw in all of the economic situations that happened during this transit, the problems that are allowed to just fester and gradually get worse, all of a sudden this transit comes along and the problem spirals out of control, and then it forces people to look back at their lack of risk assessment and risk prevention. So, and also looking at their poor strategic ideas and their poor strategy and slow response times to a problem that is all of a sudden growing right in front of their eyes. So this will be my first update video on the Mars retrograde and Cancer transit that we're experiencing right now, which is the time period from January 6th until February 24th. So I did an extensive dive into this transit and how it affects the chart of the United States, and I came to 6 very specific themes, and 2 of those themes are already fully in play with the unprecedented fires still burning in Los Angeles as of today, January 10th. So on December 3rd, I published the video, and 2 of those themes are, quote, a sense of panic to impending emergencies that are handled emotionally rather than logically, unbalanced responses shifting between hesitancy and impulsivity, and rulers re-strategizing failed policies, and the new policies being hurried, fatally flawed, and exacerbating the initial problem. So you can summarize those phrases as being caught off guard by an emergency that you simply can't control while the damage is being done. So there's this emergency, but even more importantly, that emergency is the result of failed policies that led to that emergency, and those policies having to be reconsidered and are only being reconsidered because of some kind of epic failure. So first off, as I mentioned, the heightened emotions. You can't blame the people who are watching their entire neighborhoods and their lives being burnt to ashes. You can't blame them for being in such a heightened emotional state. So this is a time period when emotions can run very high and run wild, and they can be very difficult to control. So there's this impulsivity and this lack of being able to control oneself. So the New York Times, they just ran an article today about how there are all of these artists who have lost completely everything. And one of the artists has a show later this month, and every single painting of his in that show is completely gone, as well as most of the paintings he's ever done. So filmmakers, they have lost their entire archives, reels of footage, hard drives, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment just melted away. So it's a complete crisis scenario, and we've seen this type of crisis happen time and again throughout history as a result of this transit, and I'm talking specifically about the United States. So it's a very tragic, and of course people are going to be in this state of shock. But when that shock subsides, there's going to be a ton of anger, and anger is that quintessential Mars emotion. So a huge part of this story and of these LA fire is the state and also the city's complete unpreparedness and their hesitant, slow, and illogical approach to this danger that the city of Los Angeles has that they knew was an imminent threat. So right now, everyone's on the ground, they're trying to figure everything out, but they're doing everything they can, but it was after the problem had already gotten way out of control. So what amazes me is that the risk of forest fires is it's a major issue in Los Angeles. So I've never been to Los Angeles, and I've never had the desire to visit Los Angeles, but apparently the threat of fires there is something they're always tackling and they're always dealing with, and that it's been an issue for decades. So in other words, in this case, they're completely caught off guard in their ability to respond, even though they are tweeting the National Weather Service's oh, there's a danger coming in. Well, okay, yeah, it's nice to tweet out something, but are you ready for that danger to actually manifest? And it's something that they should not be caught off guard with, because they knew something like this always had the potential of happening. So many people predicted this happening. Joe Rogan mentioned on a podcast in just July 2024 about how a firefighter told him that one day the winds are just going to take fires and burn Los Angeles down. And just a few months ago, Trump was talking about the same problem with not having sufficient water supplies in Los Angeles on Joe Rogan's podcast. So the more you look, the more you're going to find when it comes to this weak Mars retrograde in Cancer theme of improper response to emergencies. So the mayor of Los Angeles, apparently the National Weather Service was warning of extreme fire weather conditions since the Thursday of last week, and rapid fire growth and extreme behavior with any fire starts was a serious warning. But the mayor, her first warning didn't come until Monday, when she was already in Ghana. And so it's just everywhere you kind of look, it's this poor response time, this not taking seriously a very serious threat, this weak Mars symptom. And this person right here saying, there was zero preparation, there was zero thought here. So remember that Mars is the commander within us. It's the ability to lead a team on a project and to be able to assign tasks to different people in order to accomplish something. And now they're calling for investigations about why were there so much systematic failure. And you're seeing this lack of taking charge of a situation, whether it's the mayor, whether it's the governor, and things broke down so quickly and so much devastation was the result. And through the years, there has also been this criticism that there's a lack of quality forest management, and that the forest becomes so dry that the trees become like matchsticks and can go up in a moment's notice. So another thing to consider as of today, there are these erroneous evacuation orders that are rattling residents, and officials say they do not know what's causing them. So even their emergency response systems are incorrect, and they're not even responding with their automated, who knows what's the problem? They don't even know what's causing that. So again, there's another lack of a solid logical approach to figuring out how to even warn people what's going on. Again, another misfire. And then again, you have this crime problem that's been happening throughout LA for who knows how long, but it's getting worse year after year. Now you have groups of looters and groups of looters stealing from vulnerable people in this situation. They're arresting people. So you just have all of these problems piling onto one another, and it just seems to be getting more out of control and more dystopian as the days go on. And to make things even more, it's like compiling problems on top of one another. And you could say it's a perfect storm, but how does a perfect storm get created? From a ton of poor planning and the lack of responding to significant problems that are just building. So one of them is between January 2024 and April 2024, 300 fire hydrants were stolen in Los Angeles in order to be melted down and sold as scrap metal or used for whatever other purposes. And there are reports that many of the fires that get started in Los Angeles, a high percentage of them, I'm not sure the exact percent, is started by the homeless population. And the homelessness is a major problem. So when they begin starting fires, and you're talking about a very dry region, that's another detail on top of the pile of compounding problems that has to be dealt with in some way, shape, or form. And just today, certain residents found a homeless person walking around with a mini flamethrower starting fires. It's unbelievable. And so, of course, the biggest mistake was the lack of water itself to deal with this kind of situation. So the firefighters, they're forced to hesitate against their own will. They don't want to hesitate, but again, that Mars retrograde in Cancer trait, they have to hesitate in response to the problem. So in 2015, the people of the state voted for Proposition 1 to spend a little bit more than $7 billion on restructuring the water supply and the reservoirs, creating dams, and dealing with this problems of shortages. So of course, bureaucracy is slow at a glacial pace, but that's a decade ago that they were allotting all this money to deal with a problem. Well, waiting a decade to actually deal with an imminent threat like this, that's again, it's a strategy that's being implemented, but it's just so slow. Mars is a fast planet. Mars gets things done quickly. So this event, these wildfires and these burning down of major areas of Los Angeles, it encapsulates so much of what Mars retrograde and debilitated in Cancer is all about, which I discussed extensively. So how could a county that is so aware of a problem fail so miserably when the exact scenario was predicted? So when this Mars transit comes along, just within a week of it happening, it essentially blew the situation up in their face. And just like how we saw in all of the economic situations that happened during this transit, the problems that are allowed to just fester and gradually get worse, all of a sudden this transit comes along and the problem spirals out of control, and then it forces people to look back at their lack of risk assessment and risk prevention. So, and also looking at their poor strategic ideas and their poor strategy and slow response times to a problem that is all of a sudden growing right in front of their eyes. And so that is the main duty of Mars, is to be preventing these problems from happening. So a well-prepared person is thinking about situations that could cause them into an emergency situation, and then mitigating those risks as best you can to prevent them from happening in the first place, and if they do happen, to prevent them from escalating. So when this transit comes along, when a group, or when any kind of situation, in this case the United States, a major city in the United States, is caught off guard and unprepared, the worst can happen. So for me, the key theme of this story are the failed policies that have led to this emergency, and then the scrambling and inadequate response to it. So you can just look at it in a really simple way. Mars, this fire planet, creating this fire, and then in Cancer, this movable water sign, the inability to move water to stop the spread of these fires. Mars spreading out of control. So it's interesting how that aligns, this massive fire happening when Mars, the fire planet, is weak, but it's also when Mars doesn't have a control over itself. And that can mean so many different things. So just kind of the symbolic nature of Mars being out of control, and then fires gathering out of control, and then the inability to respond with moving water, which I think is interesting. And of course, also you have the firefighter, which is such a quintessential Mars profession. They're the emergency responders. They have to put out fires. You have to have a good Mars in your chart to be a good firefighter. They're fighting. Mars is the fighting planet, and they have to be thinking quickly on their feet. They have to be brave. They have to have a lot of courage to do what they do, to go directly at a problem to solve an immediate problem. That's what a good Mars does. And this Mars debilitated in Cancer retrograde, the firefighters just didn't have the tools, or they didn't have the basic resources at their disposal to respond quickly. So the firefighters were a main part of, it wasn't their fault that it happened, but I saw another report that there were no fire trucks anywhere when the Pacific Palisades was burning down. What was happening? Why was this response so poor? Well, this Mars transit, to me, is a big part of what was happening. So Mars retrograde is the perfect time to be rethinking strategy and to be rethinking about how you're doing things and dealing with practical situations in your life that could be potential problems, and about how to mitigate emergencies and to respond to emergencies as they happen. So it goes for every person, but for the United States, this transit happening in the 8th house, and with all those 4 planets in the 8th house, hopefully there aren't any more of these massive tragedies, these deadly tragedies. But when they do, if they do happen, it's because of failed strategy and being kind of with the blinders on and not considering how other people would suggest doing things in one's life, or not being able to take in criticism and being able to consider the best logical approach to something, but wanting to do things one way and not listening to outside opinions. And so for the state of California, what more do they need to enter into that mind state of listening to outside opinions? Their city is burning to the ground. Will they begin to, okay, yeah, we really need to deal with these situations with more vigor and with more honesty, and being able to rethink how we can avoid such dire emergencies in the future. But that is it for this commentary today. And so send your prayers and thoughts to all these people that have lost so much in LA, and hope for a quick resolution to this immediate danger that's still happening. So I'll be doing some more updates on this Mars transit and how it's affecting the United States, and how these themes, as we see how they'll be playing out, whether it's intense situations or more practical situations. And one of those videos I want to do will be on Facebook coming out, Mark Zuckerberg, right when this transit began, and re-strategizing a failed policy of censorship. So that video will be coming up as well. And that is a more practical and not an emergency response to something. That's actually an intelligent use of Mars. So if you'd like to know how this transit is affecting your natal chart and what it means for your personal life, you can book a reading with me at jmvedic.com, and the link will be in the description of this video. And thank you for listening.